Cinderella. Cinderella is a gentle and beautiful young woman who lives with her wicked stepmother and two envious stepsisters. Despite her kindness, she is mistreated and forced to do all the household chores, living a life of drudgery and neglect. Her stepmother and stepsisters are cruel and constantly belittle her, enjoying a life of luxury and comfort while Cinderella does all the hard work. One day, the king announces a grand ball at the palace to find a bride for his son, the prince. Every eligible maiden in the kingdom is invited to attend. Cinderella, eager to go, is heartbroken when her stepmother forbids her from attending and mocks her for her appearance. They leave for the ball, leaving Cinderella behind in her tattered clothes. As Cinderella cries by the fireplace, her fairy godmother appears. With a wave of her wand, the fairy godmother transforms Cinderella's rags into a magnificent gown and glass slippers. She turns a pumpkin into a splendid carriage and mice into horses, so Cinderella can attend the ball. However, she must return before midnight when the magic spell will wear off. At the ball, Cinderella captivates everyone with her beauty and grace, especially the prince. They dance together, and the prince falls deeply in love with her. As the clock nears midnight, Cinderella, remembering the fairy godmother's warning, hurriedly leaves the palace, accidentally leaving behind one of her glass slippers. The next day, the prince searches the kingdom for the mysterious girl whose foot fits the slipper. He arrives at Cinderella's home, where her stepsisters try on the slipper without success. When Cinderella tries it on, it fits perfectly, revealing her identity. The prince and Cinderella are joyfully reunited, and they marry in a grand ceremony. Cinderella's life of hardship is replaced with one of happiness and luxury as she becomes a beloved princess. Her stepmother and stepsisters, having been cruel and unkind, are left behind and excluded from the royal life. Cinderella and the prince live happily ever after, their love and kindness bringing them a life of joy and contentment. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there was a poor woodcutter who lived with his wife and two children, Hansel and Gretel, in a small cottage on the edge of a dark, dense forest. The family was very poor, and the woodcutter's wife was especially cruel and unkind. She often complained about their lack of food and money and constantly blamed Hansel and Gretel for their misfortunes. One year, during a time of severe famine, the woodcutter's wife persuaded him to abandon the children in the forest. She believed that they would be able to fend for themselves and that the parents would have more food if the children were gone. Although the woodcutter was deeply troubled by the idea, he eventually agreed to his wife's plan. Hansel and Gretel overheard their parents' conversation and were devastated. That night, Hansel went outside and gathered as many white pebbles as he could find, which he put into his pockets. The next day, the family set out into the forest to gather wood. Hansel and Gretel were led deep into the woods, where their parents pretended to rest and then left them behind. As the sun began to set, Hansel and Gretel were frightened and lost. However, Hansel had dropped the white pebbles along the way, and by following them, they were able to find their way back home. Their parents were furious, but they had no choice but to keep them for the time being. As time went on, the famine worsened, and the woodcutter's wife became even more insistent that the children be abandoned. This time, she suggested that the family go even deeper into the forest. Hansel, unable to gather pebbles, used pieces of bread to mark the path. Unfortunately, the birds ate the bread, and Hansel and Gretel soon found themselves completely lost. After wandering for hours, the children stumbled upon a house made entirely of candy and sweets. Exhausted and hungry, they began to eat parts of the house. Little did they know, this was the home of a wicked witch who lured children to her cottage with the promise of delicious treats. The witch, who was very old and ugly, captured Hansel and Gretel. She locked Hansel in a cage and forced Gretel to work as her servant. The witch planned to eat Hansel once he was plump enough. Every day, she would check Hansel to see if he was ready. And Hansel cleverly tricked her by holding out a bone instead of his finger, making the witch think he was still too thin. One day, the witch decided to cook Hansel despite his thinness. She ordered Gretel to prepare the oven. And while the witch was busy preparing the fire, Gretel seized the opportunity. She pushed the witch into the oven and shut the door, killing her. With the witch dead, Hansel and Gretel were free. They searched the witch's house and found treasures and jewels. They filled their pockets with the riches and made their way back to their own home. When they arrived, they discovered that their cruel stepmother had died, and their father, now deeply remorseful and regretful for his actions, welcomed them with open arms. The family lived happily ever after, with enough food and wealth to last them a lifetime. Hansel and Gretel is a timeless fairy tale about bravery, cleverness, and the triumph of good over evil. It teaches valuable lessons about resourcefulness, the importance of family, and the consequences of cruelty. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a sweet little girl who lived in a village near a forest. She was known for her cheerful nature and for wearing a red cloak with a hood, which her grandmother had made for her. Because of this, everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother asked her to visit her grandmother, who was ill and lived in a cottage deep in the woods. She packed a basket with cakes and butter to take to her grandmother and reminded her to stay on the path and not to talk to strangers. As Little Red Riding Hood walked through the forest, she met a sly old wolf who was eager to make a meal of her. The wolf, with his cunning, greeted her politely and asked where she was going. Little Red Riding Hood innocently told him that she was on her way to visit her grandmother and described the route to the wolf. The wolf, who had a wicked plan, decided to take a shortcut to the grandmother's house. He raced ahead, arriving at the cottage before Little Red Riding Hood. When he reached the house, he knocked on the door and, imitating Little Red Riding Hood's voice, called out, "Ida Euro me, Little Red Riding Hood. Euro Vey brought some cakes and butter for you." Inside, the grandmother, thinking it was her granddaughter, called out to come in. The wolf pushed open the door and found the grandmother in bed. He quickly overpowered her, locked her in a cupboard, and put on her nightgown and cap. Then he climbed into the bed and waited for Little Red Riding Hood to arrive. When Little Red Riding Hood arrived at the cottage, she was surprised to find the door open. She entered and called out, "Grandmother, Euro Vey brought you some cakes and butter." She went to the bedroom and saw the figure lying under the covers. Suspicious of how strange her grandmother looked, Little Red Riding Hood approached the bed and said, "Grandmother, what big eyes you have." The wolf, trying to hide his true identity, replied, "All the better to see you with, my dear grandmother. What big ears you have." Little Red Riding Hood continued, "All the better to hear you with, my dear." The wolf answered, "Grandmother, what big teeth you have." Little Red Riding Hood exclaimed in alarm, "All the better to eat you with." The wolf growled, leaping out of the bed. Just as the wolf was about to pounce on Little Red Riding Hood, a passing huntsman heard the commotion. He rushed into the cottage, saw the wolf, and quickly dealt with him, rescuing both the grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood. The huntsman freed the grandmother from the cupboard and, together with Little Red Riding Hood, made sure the wolf was no longer a threat. The grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood were very grateful to the huntsman for saving them. After the frightening encounter, Little Red Riding Hood learned a valuable lesson about the importance of obeying her Mothera Euro's instructions and not talking to strangers. From then on, she always stayed on the path and was more cautious in the forest. The story ends happily, with Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother living safely and contentedly, and the forest becoming a much safer place for everyone. Little Red Riding Hood is a classic fairy tale that teaches important lessons about safety, trust, and the consequences of straying from the path. It remains a beloved story for children and adults alike. The Swineherd. Once upon a time, there was a great emperor who had a beautiful daughter, the princess. She was known throughout the land for her beauty, but she was also very proud and had refused many suitors. The emperor, who was very fond of her, wanted her to marry a prince who was both noble and worthy. One day, a poor young man appeared at the emperor's court. He was dressed in simple clothes and carried a bag with him. The young man announced that he was a prince in disguise and wanted to win the princess's heart. The emperor, however, doubted the young man's claim and told him that he would have to prove his worth. The young man, who was indeed a prince but had been transformed into a poor swineherd by a sorcerer's curse, agreed to the challenge. He went to the emperor's palace and asked for work. The emperor, thinking him unworthy, gave him a job as a swineherd, taking care of the pigs. The swineherd was skilled and soon became very successful in his work. He made beautiful and magical music with a horn and created enchanting toys for the princess and the other children in the palace. He also crafted a marvelous musical instrument made from a hollowed-out piece of wood, which played beautiful melodies when touched. The princess, who was curious about the swineherd and his extraordinary skills, began to visit him frequently. She was impressed by his talent and the charm of his music. The swineherd, who was secretly still a prince, used his magical abilities to win her favor. However, he kept his true identity a secret, hoping to test her love and sincerity. The princess, who had grown fond of the swineherd, eventually asked him for a special gift. The swineherd promised to give her the most precious gift of all, a beautiful, magical rose. But he set a condition. She must prove her love for him by giving up her luxurious lifestyle and living in simplicity, just like he did. The princess was touched by his request but struggled with the idea of leaving her royal comforts behind. She was torn between her love for the swineherd and her desire for her princely life. Despite her inner conflict, she decided to take the challenge and left the palace to live with the swineherd. When the princess arrived at the swineherd's humble home, she was surprised to find it filled with happiness and warmth. She realized that the swineherd was, in fact, a noble prince, and his love for her was genuine. The swineherd revealed his true identity and asked her to marry him. Moved by his love and understanding, the princess accepted his proposal. They married in a simple yet beautiful ceremony and lived happily ever after, cherishing the love they had found in each other and the happiness they had discovered in their new life together. The Swineherd is a tale about love, sacrifice, and the importance of looking beyond appearances to find true happiness. It highlights the idea that love and sincerity are more valuable than wealth and status. Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, a king and queen rejoiced at the birth of their long-awaited daughter, Princess Aurora. The entire kingdom celebrated with great joy. But the festivities were marred by the absence of one person, an evil fairy who had been offended for not receiving an invitation to the grand christening. The king and queen had invited all the good fairies in the land to bestow gifts upon their daughter, Aurora. As the fairies took turns giving their blessings, the evil fairy, Maleficent, arrived uninvited and cast a terrible curse. She declared that on her 16th birthday, Princess Aurora would prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. The kingdom was thrown into despair. To protect their daughter, the king and queen ordered that all spinning wheels in the land be destroyed. However, a good fairy named Merryweather, who had not yet given her blessing, used her magic to soften Maleficent Euro's curse. She could not completely undo the curse, but she could change it so that Aurora would not die, but instead fall into a deep sleep for 100 years, only to be awakened by a kiss from her true love. In an effort to keep Princess Aurora safe, the good fairies decided to hide her away in a secluded cottage in the forest there. They raised her as a common girl under the name Briar Rose, far from the prying eyes of Maleficent. As Aurora grew up, she blossomed into a beautiful young woman. On the eve of her 16th birthday, the good fairies prepared a celebration in the forest cottage. Unknown to them, Maleficent had been watching and knew that her chance to fulfill the curse was near. On her 16th birthday, Aurora was lured away from the cottage by Maleficent Euro's magic. The evil fairy tricked Aurora into touching a hidden spinning wheel in an old tower. As soon as Aurora pricked her finger, she fell into a deep, enchanted sleep, just as the curse had foretold. The good fairies placed Aurora on a bed in the tower and cast a spell over the entire kingdom, putting everyone to sleep so that they might awaken with Aurora. The kingdom fell into a deep slumber as the years passed. Maleficent, reveling in her apparent victory, cast a powerful spell to protect the tower, encircling it with a thick, impenetrable bramble of thorns. She waited for the 100 years to pass, believing that her curse had triumphed. One day, a brave and noble prince named Philip, who had heard tales of the sleeping princess and the enchanted kingdom, set out on a quest to find and rescue Aurora, guided by the good fairies, who had given him a magical sword and shield. Prince Philip ventured into the dark forest, determined to break the curse. The prince battled through the treacherous thorns and brambles, finally reaching the tower where Aurora lay. Maleficent, sensing the Princea Euro's approach, transformed herself into a fearsome dragon to stop him. In a fierce battle, Prince Philip fought the dragon with bravery and skill, ultimately defeating her and breaking the spell. He reached the tower and gently kissed Aurora. At his touch, the curse was lifted, and Aurora awoke from her long sleep. The entire kingdom awoke with her, and joy filled the land once more. Princess Aurora and Prince Philip were married in a grand and joyous celebration. The kingdom rejoiced in their happiness, and Aurora Euro's parents, the king and queen, celebrated the return of their beloved daughter. The story of Sleeping Beauty is a timeless fairy tale that celebrates the triumph of good over evil, the power of true love, and the belief in a happy ending. It remains one of the most beloved and enduring tales of all time. The Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs who lived with their mother. When they grew old enough, their mother decided it was time for them to build their own houses. She told them to build their homes strong and sturdy, so they would be safe from any dangers that might come their way. With their mother Euro's advice in mind, the 3 little pigs set off on their own to build their houses. The first little pig was very lazy and decided to build his house out of straw. He thought it would be quick and easy, so he could spend more time playing. He quickly gathered a bunch of straw, built a house, and settled in. It didn't take long for him to finish, and he was proud of his speedy work. The second little pig was a bit more diligent, but still somewhat lazy. He chose to build his house out of sticks. He believed that sticks would be stronger than straw and would provide better protection. He gathered sticks and built a small house, which took him a bit more time and effort than the straw house. Once it was finished, he moved in and felt somewhat secure. The third little pig was hardworking and took his time to build his house out of bricks. He wanted his house to be strong and durable. So he spent days gathering bricks and mortar. He built a sturdy house with a solid foundation and a strong roof. It was hard work, but he was determined to make sure it would withstand any danger. One day, a big, bad wolf came along the path. He was hungry and had a strong desire for a tasty meal. He first came to the house of the first little pig. Seeing that the house was made of straw, the wolf huffed and puffed and blew the house down easily. The first little pig ran away in terror, escaping to his brother Euro's house made of sticks. The wolf followed the first little pig and arrived at the second little pig Euro's house. The second little pig was frightened but tried to make his house safe. However, the wolf was determined. He huffed and puffed and blew the stick house down. And the two little pigs ran as fast as they could to their brother Euro's house made of bricks. The wolf, now more determined than ever, arrived at the third little pig Euro's house. He huffed and puffed, but the brick house stood firm. The wolf tried again, huffing and puffing with all his might, but the brick house did not budge. The wolf was furious and decided to try a different approach. He climbed onto the roof and attempted to enter through the chimney. The three little pigs were clever and quickly devised a plan to thwart the wolf Euro's attempts. They built a large fire in the fireplace and placed a big pot of water on it to boil. When the wolf came down the chimney, he was met with the fierce heat and the smoke from the fire. He yelped in pain and scrambled back up the chimney, never to be seen again. The three little pigs were safe and sound in their sturdy brick house. They lived happily ever after, knowing that their hard work and careful planning had saved them from the big, bad wolf. The story of the three little pigs is a classic tale that emphasizes the importance of hard work, perseverance, and planning for the future. It teaches that taking the time to build something strong and durable can protect you from harm and lead to lasting success. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Goldilocks who lived in a quaint village near a deep, dark forest. She had golden hair and was known for her curiosity and adventurous spirit. One day, while wandering through the forest, Goldilocks came across a small, charming house that she had never seen before. Intrigued, she knocked on the door, but there was no answer. She turned the handle and found that the door was unlocked, so she decided to go inside. The house belonged to a family of three bears: Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear. The bears had gone for a walk in the forest while their porridge cooled down. Goldilocks entered the cozy little house and immediately noticed 3 bowls of porridge set on the table. She was very hungry from her walk and decided to taste the porridge. She tried the porridge from Papa Bear's bowl first, but it was too hot. Next, she tasted the porridge from Mama Bear's bowl, but it was too cold. Finally, she tasted the porridge from Baby Bear's bowl, and it was just right. She ate it all up and felt quite satisfied. Feeling comfortable and relaxed, Goldilocks then noticed 3 chairs in the living room. She tried sitting in Papa Bear's chair, but it was too big and uncomfortable. She then tried Mama Bear's chair, but it was too soft and squishy. Finally, she sat in Baby Bear's chair, which was just right. However, she was so comfortable that the chair broke under her weight, and she fell to the floor. Goldilocks, now feeling a bit sleepy, went upstairs to explore the bedrooms. She found 3 beds. 1 large bed, 1 medium-sized bed, and 1 small bed. She tried Papa Bear's bed first, but it was too hard. Then she tried Mama Bear's bed, but it was too soft. Finally, she tried Baby Bear's bed, and it was just right. She fell asleep on the small bed, feeling very cozy and content. While Goldilocks was asleep, the 3 bears returned home from their walk. They immediately noticed that something was amiss. Papa Bear saw that someone had been eating his porridge. Mama Bear noticed that someone had been eating her porridge too, and Baby Bear saw that his porridge was completely gone. The bears then went into the living room and discovered that someone had been sitting in their chairs. Papa Bear's chair had been sat in. Mama Bear's chair was all messy, and Baby Bear's chair was broken. They proceeded to check the bedrooms and found that someone had been lying in their beds. Papa Bear's bed was messed up. Mama Bear's bed was a bit disheveled, and Baby Bear's bed had someone sleeping in it. When Goldilocks woke up, she was startled to find herself surrounded by the three bears. She was terrified and quickly realized that she had invaded someone's home. Goldilocks jumped out of Baby Bear's bed, apologized profusely, and ran out of the house as fast as she could. She fled back through the forest to her own home, promising herself that she would be more respectful and cautious in the future. The three bears were relieved when Goldilocks left, and they went about their day, repairing Baby Bear's broken chair and tidying up the house. They were a little shaken by the intrusion but were glad that it had ended without any harm. The story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears is a classic fairy tale that explores themes of curiosity, respect, and the consequences of trespassing. It teaches a lesson about the importance of respecting others' property and the value of considering others' feelings. Pinocchio. Once upon a time, in a small Italian village, there was an old woodcarver named Geppetto who lived alone. He was a kind and gentle man who longed for a child to keep him company. One day, Geppetto carved a puppet out of a magical piece of wood, creating a wooden boy he named Pinocchio. As he finished his work, something extraordinary happened. Pinocchio began to move and talk. Overjoyed, Geppetto wished that the puppet would become a real boy. That night, a magical fairy appeared in Geppetto's workshop. She granted Geppetto's wish and brought Pinocchio to life. Though he remained a puppet, the fairy told Pinocchio that he could become a real boy if he proved himself to be brave, truthful, and unselfish. She also warned him that he would face many challenges along the way. Pinocchio was excited about his new life but quickly found that it was not as easy as he had imagined. The very next day, he encountered a sly and dishonest character named Honest John and his accomplice, Gideon the cat. They tricked Pinocchio into joining a puppet show, where he was soon kidnapped and forced to perform. Although Pinocchio eventually escaped, he found himself in more trouble when he met a deceitful fox and cat who tricked him into burying his coins in a field, promising that they would grow into a tree of gold. Pinocchio's journey was full of misadventures. He was often misled by those who sought to take advantage of his innocence. During his travels, he met a series of dubious characters, including a coachman who tricked him into going to Pleasure Island, a place where boys could indulge in all sorts of vices. On Pleasure Island, Pinocchio and other boys were transformed into donkeys because of their bad behavior. Pinocchio managed to escape with his donkey ears and tail, but he had to face further trials to break free from this curse. Throughout his adventures, Pinocchio faced numerous dangers, and each time, he learned valuable lessons about honesty, responsibility, and self-discipline. Despite his efforts to follow the fairy's advice, he made many mistakes and often let his desire for immediate gratification lead him astray. Pinocchio's greatest challenge came when he discovered that Geppetto had gone searching for him and had been swallowed by a giant shark, often referred to as a whale. Determined to save his father, Pinocchio bravely entered the shark's belly. Inside, he found Geppetto and devised a plan to escape. With his resourcefulness and bravery, Pinocchio managed to free both himself and Geppetto from the shark. After their daring escape, Pinocchio and Geppetto returned home, where Pinocchio's bravery and selflessness were finally rewarded. The magical fairy appeared once more, acknowledging Pinocchio's growth and his demonstration of the virtues she had mentioned. Pinocchio was transformed into a real boy, and he and Geppetto lived happily together, with Pinocchio becoming a loving, honest, and responsible son. Pinocchio is a timeless tale about the journey from childhood innocence to maturity. It teaches valuable lessons about the importance of honesty, integrity, and the rewards of hard work and dedication. The story remains a beloved classic, inspiring readers with its message of personal growth and the transformative power of love. The Ugly Duckling. Once upon a time, on a sunny farmyard, a mother duck was eagerly waiting for her ducklings to hatch. She had been sitting on her eggs for many weeks. And finally, the day came when the first egg began to crack. Out came a fluffy yellow duckling, followed by the rest of the eggs as they hatched one by one. Most of the ducklings were just as expected, cute and yellow. However, one of the ducklings looked very different from the others. This duckling was larger, had gray feathers, and appeared awkward and out of place. The mother duck loved all her ducklings, but the other animals on the farm were not so kind. The other ducks, chickens, and even the farmer's children mocked and teased the strange-looking duckling. They called him names like Ugly Duckling and refused to play with him. This constant ridicule made the Ugly Duckling very unhappy and lonely. Feeling rejected and hurt, the Ugly Duckling decided to leave the farm and find a place where he would be accepted. He wandered through meadows and forests, searching for a place where he could belong. Along his journey, he encountered many animals, but none of them welcomed him or offered him any comfort. The Ugly Duckling grew increasingly despondent as the seasons changed from summer to autumn, and then to winter. Winter was harsh and cold, and the Ugly Duckling struggled to find food and shelter. He was often hungry and shivering from the cold. One day, he came across a flock of beautiful swans gracefully gliding on a lake. The sight of these majestic birds made the Ugly Duckling dream of being as elegant and admired as they were, but he was too afraid to approach them. As spring arrived, the Ugly Duckling continued to observe the swans from afar, wishing he could be like them. One day, as he looked at his reflection in the water, he noticed something remarkable. The reflection in the water was no longer of the awkward, gray duckling he once was, but of a magnificent swan. The Ugly Duckling realized that he had grown into a beautiful swan, just like the ones he had admired. He was overjoyed and filled with pride. The swans welcomed him warmly and accepted him as one of their own. The once ugly duckling had transformed into a stunning swan, admired and respected by all. The new swan found true happiness among his newfound friends and discovered his place in the world. He understood that he was never truly ugly. He was just different, and he had finally found where he belonged. The journey had taught him that inner beauty and the ability to overcome challenges often lead to the most wonderful transformations. The story of the Ugly Duckling is a timeless tale that celebrates personal growth, self-acceptance, and the beauty of finding one's true self. It teaches us that true beauty comes from within and that every individual has the potential to become something extraordinary, no matter how different they may seem at first. Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time, in a modest village, there lived a poor widow and her only son, Jack. They were struggling to make ends meet, and their most valuable possession was a cow that provided them with milk. However, as the cow grew older, it stopped giving milk, and the family found themselves in dire need. One day, Jack's mother asked him to take the cow to the market and sell it to buy food. Jack set out on his journey with the cow, but on the way to the market, He encountered a peculiar old man who offered him 5 magical beans in exchange for the cow. The old man promised that these beans had the power to bring great fortune. Jack, intrigued by the offer, agreed to the trade and returned home with the beans. When Jack's mother saw that he had come home without any money and only a handful of beans, she was furious. She scolded Jack and threw the beans out of the window. Jack went to bed feeling very sorry for himself, thinking that he had made a terrible mistake. The next morning, Jack woke up to find a gigantic beanstalk had grown overnight from the beans. It reached up high into the clouds, disappearing into the sky. Jack, driven by curiosity and hope, decided to climb the beanstalk to see where it led. After a long and arduous climb, Jack emerged from the clouds and found himself in a magical land high above the earth. There, he discovered a grand castle belonging to a fearsome giant. Jack was cautious but also eager to explore, so he approached the castle. Inside the castle, Jack found that the giant's wife was kind and hospitable. She hid Jack from her husband when he arrived home. The giant was known for his enormous appetite and his penchant for eating anything that moved. He often roared, "Fee fi fo fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman," as he sniffed around the castle, searching for intruders. While the giant was out, Jack noticed that the castle was filled with treasures. He discovered a hen that laid golden eggs and a magical harp that played beautiful music on its own. Jack decided to take these items, believing they would help improve his and his mother's fortunes. Jack managed to steal the hen and the harp and started climbing down the beanstalk with his treasures. As he descended, he could hear the giant's booming footsteps following him. Fearing for his life, Jack hurriedly reached the ground and called out to his mother for help. With the giant still coming down the beanstalk, Jack grabbed an axe and chopped it down with all his might. The beanstalk fell, and the giant, who was still climbing down, fell to the ground with it. The giant was never seen again, and Jack and his mother were safe from harm. Jack and his mother were overjoyed with their newfound wealth. The hen that laid golden eggs provided them with endless riches, and the magical harp's beautiful music brought joy and harmony to their home. They lived happily ever after, enjoying a life of comfort and prosperity. The story of Jack and the Beanstalk is a classic fairy tale that highlights themes of bravery, adventure, and the rewards of daring to pursue one's dreams. It teaches that sometimes taking a leap of faith can lead to extraordinary results and that courage and resourcefulness can transform one's destiny. Did you like the stories? Click on like